She also holds a certification in the care of adult medical and surgical patients. She is a wife, mother, and born again child of the Most High King.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Family Health Matters. I'm your host, Wendy Bridgers, and we are live in the studio on today. We are here every Thursday from 3 to 3:30 on Awesome Radio 106.9 FM. Family Health Matters because we do believe the health of our families matter. And today I have with me Angie Watson, who has been here with us before, and she is our diabetes nutritionist specialist. And so she covers both nutrition and diabetes, and she is considered our expert. And we're going to be talking about the ABCs of heart disease today because February is American Heart Health Month. And I'm hoping everybody is focusing not only just on February, but we should be concerned about our heart health all the time. So we're excited to have Angie with us. So welcome, Angie, again to Family Health Matters. Look forward to talking with you today about the ABCs of heart health.
Thank you, Wendy. It's always a pleasure to just speak with you. And yes, I'm excited to talk about heart disease and diabetes. They kind of go hand in hand, and we have some good information to share.
Okay, very, very good. So again, we said, February is recognized as American or the National Heart Month, and it focuses on the heart, cardio, and it also focuses on vascular, and that's the blood vessels. And so we're going to be talking about how um, all of this diabetes, hypertension, nutrition, all of this have an effect on our heart health. And we want to be healthy and we want to make sure that our hearts are healthy. So, Andrew, we're going to get started. Just to get us started, I'm going to just give you a few minutes just to talk about just a little bit about what um, heart health is. What does it mean, and what does it mean to you as a diabetes educator and as a dietitian?
Okay. So heart health, as you mentioned, it's looking at the cardiovascular system. I think a lot of times people, when they speak about heart health, we think automatically of a heart attack. But of course, it's, risk of heart attack, stroke, problems with circulation, problems with what they call coronary artery disease, or sort of hardening of the arteries. Can you hear me okay, Wendy?
Can you maybe talk up just a little bit?
Sure. So heart health encompasses, a wide variety. But I think, as far as diabetes, we are always looking at the health of the blood vessels because the complications that can happen with diabetes, things like damage to the eyes, damage to the kidneys, circulation to the legs and feet, damage to the nerves, all of those are related to blood vessels being damaged, and in particular what we call the small blood vessels. So the eyes, the nerves, the kidneys, they call those microvascular complications. So micro is small and vascular refers to those blood vessels. And we know that when sugar is high in the blood, it starts damaging those blood vessels. So as a diabetes educator, I always have discussions around heart health with clients and kind of talk about that mechanism because, and we can talk about this too, people talk, say that high blood pressure is a silent killer. And I kind of think diabetes or high blood sugars is the same way. You don't necessarily feel that bad when your sugar's running high, but on the inside, in those little tiny blood vessels, like in the eyes, they could be getting damaged. They could be getting, weakening and getting that damage, and you never know until, unfortunately, it bursts or gets to a point where it's, a more serious condition.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in with all of that, taking care of your heart incorporates taking care of your nutrition status and what you're eating. And some people ask the question, what comes first? Is it diabetes that's causing the heart problems, or is it the cardiovascular that's causing the diabetes? But I think it's the fact that the diabetes can be a complication that will cause you to have heart disease. So as you were talking about it, let's go jump into. I know you shared with me you had some statistics that you wanted to share, just a little bit about how the effect of cardiovascular disease or heart health affects the Americans.
Yes. So in general, heart disease is the leading cause of death in America. So for men, women, people of racial and ethnic groups, a person dies every 36 seconds from cardiovascular disease here in the United States. So that's sort of staggering. You know, this is something that, you know, part of it, I would say, is preventable by making those healthy lifestyle choices. And I know we're going to talk a lot about that today, good nutrition and maybe a little physical activity. And some of it is not, you know, more related to genetics and that type of thing. But I believe we can change these numbers. Um, so about 1 in 4 deaths in the United States are from heart disease. And again, you know, I believe it does not have to be that way, that we can lessen, you know, the incidence of heart disease. And certainly, you know, the loss of life is the biggest loss of all. And, you know, damages that can happen, long-term effects of things like the stroke and heart attack, those are huge losses to the individuals and families. At the same time, we have a financial burden that all of this, you know, incurs. And so here in the United States, heart disease costs about $363 billion each year. And that figure is actually based on 2016-2017 statistics, so it's probably more than that now. But it's a lot of money and financial burden, like I said, which pales in comparison to the health burden. But I did want to mention that.
Perfect, very good, because it's real. That's real, and the finance piece is just caring and taking care of those cardiovascular diseases that um, just runs up the cost. And then too, you have to think about if you have insurance and don't have insurance, and then especially if it boils down to some things we can manage and some things we can take care of, and some things like you said that risk factors that we can't do anything about, but there are the risk factors that we can change. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit on, well, talk about mostly, I want to focus on that, is the part about the nutrition piece and how it can affect our health, heart health. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about some of the risk factors, and then we're going to go into talking about some of the numbers.
Okay. So yeah, risk factors for heart disease. The three main risk factors in the general population are high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and smoking. Um, those are the big three, the top three. Other risk factors include diabetes. We know that people with diabetes are at twice the risk of heart disease. And to be honest, like you said, I'm not sure what that correlation is if one causes the other, but we do know that they go hand in hand,
Right.
and that risk is there. Um, Being physically inactive, not being active, is a risk factor. Definitely our nutrition or our diet, so consuming a lot of saturated fats or trans fats, foods high in cholesterol, that increases your risk. Also alcohol abuse or excess alcohol consumption. And some things that we don't have control over, like our age and family history, our gender. I know we hear a lot about women and heart disease, and I'm passionate about that because women typically have less typical symptoms of, like, say, a heart attack, and so sometimes it's not detected as soon or as often. But still, the incidence of heart disease is higher in men. So men can't, you know, just sit back and relax and say, oh, now this is more of a women's issue with the heart health. You know, we've got to keep the focus on both, really. And another factor that you could argue some is, you know, genetics, but some is definitely lifestyle, would be obesity, and particularly carrying excess weight or fat in the abdominal area. So we look at something called waist circumference. And for men, if they have a waist circumference of 40 inches or above, That's a risk factor for heart disease and diabetes, honestly. And for women, if that waist was 35 inches or above, then that's a risk factor. And I do want to say I'm kind of smiling because I've been through and done these measurements and talked to people about measurements. So sometimes I'll say gentlemen because their sizing is in those inches. They say, well, I wear a size 38 pant, but the pant is kind of underneath the belly roll, if you will. So that waist size that I'm talking about is at the belly button, okay?
Right.
Not below that where you kind of let the belly hang over a little bit. So unfortunately, a lot of us, and me included, I carry extra weight there in my belly, are at higher risk of heart disease and diabetes from carrying that excess fat there. It starts to interfere with our organs.
Yeah, and that is the hardest weight to get rid of. Is in the abdomen area. It is the hardest. It's the hardest. It's the hardest weight to get rid of. You can do a lot of things. People can lose weight in their legs and their arms, but for some reason around that waistline, it's just sort of sticks there.
Yep. Yep.
So let's talk about ABCs. And one of the ABCs that I really think people really may not understand a lot about is to start off with the A1C. So with this, we're looking at the numbers and how important it is that people understand and know what their numbers are, and be aware that when you go to your primary care or wherever you go to the clinic, that you ask and be inquisitive, want to know what your numbers are. And if they start telling you what your numbers are and you don't understand, then be proactive and ask, what does this mean? So you have to advocate for yourself and make sure that you get an understanding of what's going on. So let's talk about the A1C and what does that mean and how is it done and where can I get it from?
Sure. So A1C, the sort of long form of that is hemoglobin A1C, and it is a measure or a test of what a person's blood sugar has been averaging over a 3-month period. So this is a test that is always done on folks that have a diagnosis of diabetes. Is sometimes done when folks have prediabetes, pretty often done, but may or may not be done for those in the general population. In the general population, usually a glucose or a blood sugar test is done, which gives us kind of that one moment in time. Generally, it's a fasting number. When you go for your routine blood work and they tell you to fast, not eat or drink anything, in that routine blood work, they're always checking your sugar. But that's a one moment in time, so sometimes things get missed. It doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. So that A1C really gives us a big picture. And
Angie, let me stop it. But can people ask when they go in if they don't have a history of diabetes or pre-diabetes, and they know it runs in their family, or they just want to be proactive and want to know what their A1C? That's a question that they can ask their primary care provider, right?
Yes, they can. I would say kind of start with, look at risk factors. I know some providers are hesitant to check an A1C if someone doesn't have, known prediabetes or diabetes or many risk factors. And I'm not sure if it's just the expense of the test. I'm not sure if maybe insurance doesn't always cover it. I did find out recently that if you have prediabetes, insurance only covers for that A1C test to be done once a year, which I was very surprised because normally we want to check it more often to make sure it's not starting to creep up and to see the effects of our lifestyle habits. And just a personal story, I actually, years ago, I went to a diabetes conference and they had what they call the point of care A1C test. They were new at the time. And I said, I'm going to go get my A1C tested because, I was a new diabetes educator and this is fun. And my number came back as 5.7, which is just on the edge of prediabetes. And I had never had any history. So I said, that can't be right. I was in denial. A lot of A lot of my clients sometimes are. And so the next day I went to the other big company, that the competition that had these A1C point of care tests, and guess what? It was 5.7. So when I came back from the conference, I did contact my doctor, and said I wanted to have my A1C done. And in that case, since I have switched doctors, but that physician really didn't want to do the test, and I had to really push for it, and explain why I wanted it done and my family history. My mom has diabetes, my sister has diabetes. So it's just like you said, sometimes you have to be your own healthcare advocate. But would it be realistic for everyone out there who's listening to ask for an A1C? Not necessarily.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And you know, and I guess that's too, that goes back, you're right. The question that you can ask is, and then, you know, if you want it, and then you ask the question, is this something that's going to be covered by my insurance? And do I have the risk factors that would you suggest or recommend that I have it done?
Yeah.
So that's a good point. That's a good point. But you still, if you're thinking about it, or if you have a history of diabetes, you need to make sure that you're getting that A1C test done. And it's a blood test. It's a lab test that you can have. You can't. It's not one of those, as you mentioned earlier about the finger stick that you do at home. You have to
Right.
actually go in and have blood work drawn.
Yes, that's right. Now, some of the endocrinology offices, or even now some primary cares, have a medical device that they can test A1C in the office. And
Right.
they will do a finger stick and test it during that visit, but it's not something that you can test at home.
Yeah, so it's the difference between that fasting, that finger stick that you're checking your glucose, especially if you're doing like a sliding scale at home. The doctor has told you to, you know, adjust your insulin based on your finger stick. That's a total different reading from what your A1C is.
Yep, that's correct. And I do want to say really quick, because I never talked about the numbers, and we want you to know your numbers today as we talk about these ABCs, numbers for all of them, and what the target is. So A1C, our target is less than 7. So I always say the magic number is 7, and we want that A1C level to be below that. So generally somewhere in the 6s. If someone has diabetes, we know it's well controlled if that A1C is less than 7.
Okay. Okay. So less than 7 is what a person with diabetes should be
That's
shooting for,
correct.
less than 7. But the normal range, or the range for somebody who, if you just having the A1C, you just randomly checked for somebody.
Yes, so a healthy person without any prediabetes or diabetes, the A1C would be less than 5.7.
Okay.
And
All
then
right.
starting
So
at
you know your
5.7.
range.
Yes.
Okay. All righty. We got A.
Yes.
All right.
So
So ready for B.
B. Yes, B is blood pressure. So we know that when we have, high blood pressure, that is putting strain on those blood vessels. Anytime you force something, in with a higher pressure, it's going to push out on the walls of whatever that liquid is flowing through. So blood pressure obviously plays a big role in heart health. The ideal blood pressure, let's say for someone who doesn't have diabetes, is less than 120/80. But for those who have diabetes and have a diagnosis of high blood pressure, or also called hypertension, the goal then is less than 140/90. So some people may say, well, that sounds high, 140. And, the lower the better. So some of our clients, living with diabetes, they can keep their, say, top number in the 120s or under that, and the bottom number, 80 or below. But some are not able to. Sometimes our body is just kind of working against us. And you may be on 2 or 3 medicines, and kind of the best you can get is 138 for that top number. So the lower the better, but it is considered in target or in range if you have diabetes and high blood pressure. Top number less than 140, bottom number less than 90.
Okay. And you're managing. So if you own your blood pressure medicines, you have something ordered, then you need to be taking it.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Now, I think, well, let's jump back really quickly. I don't want us to run out of time, but jump back to the A. One of the eating habits, we didn't mention that, about overly adding that piece in there.
Yeah, so all of these ABCs have a lifestyle component that can have a huge impact weight loss. So healthy eating in general that leads to weight loss will help all three of these. And I'll just say really quick, the C is cholesterol. We'll get there, but just so you know what I'm talking about. A1C, blood pressure, and cholesterol, they all can be detrimental to our heart, but we can modify habits to decrease that risk. So when we're talking about A1C, the biggest impact on our blood sugars are carbohydrates and sugar. Carbohydrates being, starchy foods. So added sugars in the American diet are, I'll say, in excess. The American Heart Association a few years ago came up with recommendations for added sugars, and their recommendation is that men have no more than 9 teaspoons a day, which is the equivalent of 36 grams of added sugar. And women have no more than 6 teaspoons a day of added sugar, which is the equivalent of 24 grams. To put that in perspective, 1 can of soda, a 12 ounce, not these large bottles, has about 8 to 10 teaspoons of sugar, depending on the flavor. So
right there.
You've already blown it out of the park. And same with, sweet tea, very similar numbers for sweet tea, juice, your sports drinks, some of them that are not zero, Gatorade, Powerade, lemonades. Sugared beverages are the number one source of added sugars in the American diet.
Okay. All right. I wanted to make sure we got that in there.
Yes.
And with the healthy factor with the blood pressure?
Yeah, so blood pressure, the nutritional piece that has the biggest impact is our sodium or salt. So I think, through the years, a lot of people have gotten the message of, don't use the salt shaker, limit the salt shaker. And, I see, in doing my interviews with clients, there's a lot of people that don't add salt to their food, which is great. However, we live in a world of convenience and pre-made and pre-packaged and grab this on the go. And those type of foods, when you're not cooking food fresh at home, those foods need a way to last a little bit longer than something that you would cook at home and plan to eat right away. And one of the ways they make it last longer is through salt or sodium. So that could be, the preservative effect that they're trying to use, like a lot of our canned goods in the grocery store, or sometimes it's flavor, fast food places and even sit-down restaurants. A lot of times that food is high in sodium because a lot of us like the taste of salt. So we really have to look at limiting those processed foods and really limiting eating out or making those wise choices when we're eating out.
Okay, good. Those wise choices when you're eating out. Okay. All right. We mentioned that cholesterol. So that was a little bit about cholesterol, and make sure you define the difference between that bad and that good cholesterol. Because everybody wants to know, what's the bad one? What's the bad one?
That's right. That's right. So, cholesterol, you have kind of components of cholesterol. So you have your total cholesterol, and then you have a breakdown of good and bad cholesterol. So LDL is the bad cholesterol. And the way to remember that is L for lousy. Okay? Oh. So LDL is lousy. That's the bad cholesterol. HDL is the good cholesterol. And we remember that as healthy or happy. I like happy.
I like
lousy cholesterol and happy cholesterol. Okay? LDL is lousy, HDL is happy. So we want more of the HDL. We want to increase our HDL number when possible and decrease our LDL number. And the way to do that is through diet, limiting what we call saturated fats, which are a lot of fats in like high-fat animal products, like our higher-fat meats and full-fat dairy products, that type of thing. And also limiting trans fats. Trans fats are in a lot of processed foods and in a lot of like fast foods. Some of that is changing, but staying away from like potato chips and pastries and things like that, they have a lot of trans fat. And going for those good fats, healthy fats, things like olive oil and avocados, nuts, seeds, nut butters, all of those are your good fats that will help that HDL or that happy cholesterol.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, so you got to make sure you watch that lousy cholesterol, the LDH. Okay, so what about, we mentioned something that you mentioned about the trans fats, right? About the So when you're looking at or going to the grocery store and you're looking at the canned items, what should we be looking for and watching for that when we're trying to decide what we're going to buy?
Yeah. So let's say if you're looking at food labels, canned items, the main things you're going to look at are the sodium content and the fat content. Generally, your canned foods, don't have a lot of fat in them, so sodium would be the main thing you're looking for. And you want a serving to be less than 240 milligrams. That's considered low sodium. Again, the lower the better, but definitely less than 240 milligrams if you're looking at sodium on that nutrition facts label. And then trans fats are going to be on the label also. You can look for them specifically. But in general, they're put in foods to kind of aid that freshness of foods that are kind of crispy, crunchy. So like potato chips, crackers, and then also baked goods, donuts, pastries, things like that. It keeps that freshness longer. But those are the bad fats. Those are lousy.
Okay, you just hurt my heart, but okay. But we're
I'm
talking about
sorry.
heart
Me
health.
too.
You want to keep my heart healthy. Okay, so we're winding up because we're down to almost 2 more minutes on it. And so, what would you suggest? I know we talked a little bit about. We didn't talk any about exercising, but when you're thinking about exercising and losing weight, how do you decide? Say you want to lower your A1C, and really quickly that, and people say, if I could just lose weight, how do you decide how much weight do I need to shoot for? And that's going to be sort of like our wrap up. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So there's BMI, which tells us what's a healthy body weight. A lowest risk body weight stands for body mass index. But honestly, a lot of us can't get to a healthy BMI. It's very challenging. So we know now just losing 5 to 10% of your body weight significantly helps your heart health and diabetes. So if you weigh 200 pounds, 5 to 10% would be 10 to 20 pounds. Still not easy to lose 10 to 20 pounds, but it's very doable. And so finding resources, meeting with a registered dietitian, increasing that activity. You don't even necessarily have to join a gym, but get more steps in during the day, do some gardening, do some, parking further at the store, being more active. And then even with nutrition, don't overcomplicate it. Just start cutting back. If you cut back portions, that'll cut back on everything. Fat, sugar, salt, all of them. So you don't even necessarily need a scientific, formula. Just start cutting back on the amount that you're eating. For most of us, we eat too big a portion.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Angie, thank you so much for the ABCs of diabetes and a healthy heart. I appreciate you so much. Again, thank you for being here with us, Angie Watson, our specialist with diabetes and education. And I am Wendy Bridges, your host for Family Health Matters. We're here every Thursday at 3 o'clock on Awesome Radio 106.9. So please continue to join us every Thursday where we endeavor to bring you good information to keep your family safe and healthy, because we do believe the health of our families do matter. So thank you for joining us on Facebook and on GPAT and on YouTube. So we'll see you next time on Family Health Matters.